Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command.
The Cardiac Commanders are the Clutch Commanders!
With former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome into Take Command with former 10-year NFL tight end Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. We're with you 3 times a week after the game, then a film review, generally Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we look ahead within the next couple of days to the upcoming opponent. So make sure you are feeling the rhythm of the week here and that you download, review, rate, subscribe, all that stuff to the pod so that we're in your feed when we drop a new episode. Of course, you can listen to us as well. Logan's got all of his Commanders obligations on their social platforms. I'm on 106.7 The Fan from 2 to 6:30 every day. All right, Logan, last time out was not pretty. Kedrick Golston and I had the honor of discussing that game moments after it ended as Washington lost in Dallas by 22, got doubled up. I mentioned this in the post game, but I looked this up. First time the Commanders have given up 40 or more, lost by 20 or more, and committed 10 or more penalties in 11 years. I mean, this was about as bad as it gets for a regime that just hasn't had clunkers to this extent. This was the biggest loss in terms of point differential of the Dan Quinn era. So I think we'll start with the defense, but just paint with a broad brush. You were in Dallas. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was Dallas is a good football team offensively. And I think, I was talking to London Fletcher about this yesterday on the Booth Review podcast, which is something we do for the Commanders. And when you're playing good offenses, like they're going to get stuff, right? They're going to find these explosive 50-50s down the field. Like George Pickens is one of the best, if not the best 50-50 contested catch receiver. Like they're going to find those opportunities because that's what they're good at, right? That's like their thing they major in. It's like when you play Philadelphia last year, like they're going to run the football. They're going to find an explosive run with Saquon Barkley, right? However, the Fletch, because he's like a defensive guy, Hall of Fame kind of caliber player and all that kind of stuff. He was like, you got to win a couple of those, couple of third downs, couple of critical down and distance. You got to kind of find ways to get edges. And he and I both agreed that they just didn't do that with enough regularity in this game, right? And, my first instinct as an offensive player is to say the offense didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and we'll talk about that when we get to the offense. But I do think that they just couldn't make enough plays when they had to for a myriad of reasons, and we'll get into the details on that as we go.
So let's talk about the defensive woes first. We'll separate the offense for another segment, but this defense gives up chunks of 74, 44, 37, 33, 24, 18, and then 17, 17, 16, 15 in terms of the explosive 15-plus plays. It was a 5th time in 7 games they have not generated a single takeaway. So just starting with the defensive performance, when you watched it, what were your big picture thoughts on how bad this was?
Yeah, going back and watching the film, I think there was a lot of things that came to the forefront. Let's talk about that explosive play to CeeDee Lamb. I think that's a really good example and maybe like a microcosm of what's going on with the team. So, for example, like they're in some type of Tampa 2, which I really like to call. It's like this inverted Tampa 2. You get, Frankie Louvu as the flat player. I forget who the other flat player is, but kind of your atypical flat players. The corners are kind of running deep to one's Quan, one's Marshawn Lattimore in terms of the 2 shell, and you get someone running up the middle of the field. And I think you get some players who are in different spots based on guys coming new to the team and new roles. And so like nobody in Tampa 2, like that Tampa player has to carry the vertical. He has to carry CeeDee Lamb. And for whatever reason, that player is not doing it. So CeeDee Lamb is running wide open down the middle of the field, which is the weakest point of cover 2, right? Or a cover 2. Like if you're just running straight cover 2, the reason Tampa 2 was invented was to keep people from running down the middle of the field, right? So they don't carry that. And, on Dallas radio, they're talking about how that wasn't actually the route CeeDee Lamb was supposed to run. He just ended up running it because there was space there and he felt no one was carrying him, which is 100% right on his part, right? So coverage bust to start the thing off, right? The rush doesn't quite get home. They're not creating an effective pass rush. And that's kind of, I think, a mark of the injuries at the position. So we got a new guy as the Tampa player, not doing exactly what he's supposed to do. We don't get the pass rush. We're banged up on the perimeter of the defensive line. And obviously there's a big completion, and it's compounded by the fact that both post safeties are running into each other. That should never happen because there should be a Tampa player carrying that to the middle of the field, right? So I look at that stuff, and in the moment, you're like, I was so irritated because I'm like, man, two guys just ran into each other. What's going on? But that shouldn't have happened. It's a mental mistake that happened earlier in the play, right? So that's an example to me of the Commanders not doing what they're supposed to do. So compare that to the Trey Amos 50-50 down the sideline where Daron Payne wins quickly and Dak just lays a ball in there. Pickens does a great job catching it right on the right sideline there. That, to me, is something that I can deal with. Like, the coverage is pretty good. The rush is pretty good. Dak and Pickens make a play. When you're playing a team like Dallas, you can't have the unforced errors. And I think that's what that first explosive play, or maybe the second explosive play to CeeDee Lamb exudes or illuminates. It's the fact that the coverage call, to my money, is correct. It's a good call. It obviously confuses Dak, at least initially, right? But then we don't execute the call well, and then we compound it by making a kind of a Keystone Cops mistake. But I don't even fault the two guys that were involved in the collision because it shouldn't have even gotten to that point because of the way the coverage should be executed.
But what is Lattimore doing on that play? Like, I get he's dropping.
A half player. He's a half player. Like,
he's tracking the ball.
So think about this, Grant. That ball should never be completed there because there should be somebody running up the middle of the field with him, right? So he's there. He's got his half of the field. Quan's got his half of the field. Then they're converging to the middle because the ball's there. They're both trying to make a play on the football. They both run into each other. So, like, yes, did he make it? Did he compound the error? Sure, but I look at it and I say to myself, like, he is now operating outside the modus operandi for that specific call in the defense. Both of them are, right? Quan and Marshawn, right? Does that make sense? So to me,
does. And I get what you're saying, like, in a vacuum. To me, it seems like his awareness on that play on Madden was a 0, where, like, you're tracking the ball like a punt returner in the middle of the field, and dude cuts you off, and then you take out the other DB. It's a Keystone Cops moment. I get what you're saying. I don't know that he necessarily.
So Grant, where's that ball normally completed? If you're running, if no one's carrying, if you're playing Tampa 2,
yeah,
no one's carrying, like just playing cover 2, that ball is normally completed down the middle over the top.
Seam. Yes,
right. That's where the ball is normally completed. So to me, he's playing the ball down the middle over the top. Now, I'm not absolving him of responsibility. Like, I think if you were to ask him and you were to ask Quan, could they both have played it better? 100%. But I'm just saying it got to a point where it shouldn't have gotten because of a technical breakdown earlier in the down. And that's the thing that I find that I think, again, kind of is a microcosm of the larger issues with the defense, where it's like the call is good, and then all of a sudden we don't get the execution on the call, and then we get a breakdown in the secondary with two guys running into each other. So to me, that's more what that is. And again, like, I'm sure if you asked Marshawn today, he would say, yeah, I got to play it better. Quan would say the same
and that's
thing.
Kind of the part I'm talking about, I guess. Like, I know everything you're saying about why the play went bad is correct. I'm saying, okay, it happened. Let's be a football player a little bit, like on the back end.
But I think when you say let's be a football player, like, that ball traditionally is completed down and over the top.
Right.
He's playing it down and over the top. So again, like, you got to play ball, but like, again, like, how many times have you repped playing that football? No one runs straight cover 2 anymore, Grant. It's not a thing people do.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're in a situation where you're playing straight cover 2 because no one's carrying the vertical, right? So, like, how many reps this year or in the last 5 years of his career does he have at that? Like, that's my question to you.
But you're saying it's just not possible that he would just look at where CeeDee Lamb is coming in the path and break up a pass.
So this is the thing I think people sometimes have a hard time with is, like, you have eye discipline rules, right? So, like, when you're in cover 2, and I don't know their exact rules, but let's just make up some rules for the sake of this conversation, right? You are carrying number 2 vertical, right? So my eyes are on number 2. I'm playing with eyes on number 2 through 2 to the quarterback. Let's just say that's my rule, right? All of a sudden, ball comes out, right? It's not going to my guy. It's going to the middle of the field where there should be somebody there. I start tracking the football, and I think I'm in space by myself, right? So it's like you saying he should have awareness of CeeDee Lamb. It's like my vision is not on CeeDee Lamb. That's not my responsibility. I'm playing through to the quarterback. And all of a sudden, as I start tracking the ball, do I check that CeeDee Lamb's there? I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch the film. But I think like that's something that people who don't play in these coverage structures forget is their awareness isn't the all 22. It isn't the TV copy.
Sure.
It's what they're supposed to be looking at ideally.
Yeah.
And again, I think it leads to this kind of mistake. And again, the thing I would point to, and I'm not trying to make excuses for him, I'm just trying to provide context, is how many times has he been the half player in cover 2 in his career would be my question to you. So how many times has he had an opportunity to make a play like that in his career? And I would say it's probably less than 5 if I was really, really thinking about it. So like so I know people want to roast him. And again, if you asked him, he'd probably say that he can be better. And there's no doubt about it. And I think he would probably say that he could.
I think that's my point. Then me and him agree, I guess.
But I mean, that's what good football players do is you take responsibility for something that, but I, as a coach, right, I think I'd look at it and say, is that a realistic expectation in that moment, given the number of reps he's had, given the way this defense is supposed to be executed? And I'd probably say no. And again, like I'm sure if you would ask Joe Wood Jr., he'd probably say something similar because that's what good teams do is they take ownership of those moments. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Oh, then I'll defer to you. I think there's somewhere in there where everything you're saying is correct, and that ball's in the air for a really long time. In your peripheral vision, you could see CeeDee Lamb coming across the field. But if you think that's too tough of an ask, I'll defer to you.
Grant, I'm just saying. Like I'm just saying. Like you played 7-on-7 flag football out with your buddies before, right? You've been looking at your responsibilities. You've run to undercut a ball and someone undercuts you. Like,
of course,
shit happens. You know what I'm saying? Like it's, and again, because of the structure of the defense, because of the number of reps he's got on it, like again, like could he played it better? Sure. But I think when you look at the play, when you look at the coverage, it's kind of stacked against him a little bit in terms of making a good play in that moment.
Well, there were other plays too where
no doubt
I would defend him on other things that he's getting killed for. I don't think the pass interference of 37 yards down to the 2-yard line to start the game was a very good call. Now it gets called sometimes because, he doesn't get his head around in time or whatever they decided to throw the flag for. Those are two physical dudes hand fighting all the way down the field. Pickens involved too. I wouldn't have called that PI. But I want to ask you about the 44-yard play at the end of the half. So this was George Pickens setting up what was the 33-yard run. I actually thought Lattimore played it really, really well on the sideline. He's in phase, pretty tight coverage, perfect throw, perfect catch. Was talking to Jay Gruden on my show yesterday, and he hated the play call, basically. He said on 2nd and 17, before the half like that, there's no reason you're not helping with the deep safety over top of Pickens, who runs those 9 routes one-on-one. He doesn't like that they asked on 2nd and 17, Lattimore to be on an island down the field rather than basically forcing Dak to check it down and make Aubrey kick a 65-yard field goal. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I think it's pretty easy to play Monday morning quarterback. And so what I will say, I have a lot of respect for Jay, and he's a really smart dude. He's forgotten more football than I know. But on that play, they're in quarters coverage, right? And so they're in quarters coverage. They're in basically a 3 by 2. They motion the second guy away, so they get isolation there in quarters coverage. So when in quarters coverage versus a 4-by-1 set, it basically becomes lock man to that side. Because the quarter safety that had number 2 to the side of George Pickens now has to play the 4 receiver side. So his eyes are away. So the call initially is quarters, right? Everyone knows quarters. That's really good against 4 verticals. That's really good down the field. But because of how they formationed it, I'm talking about Dallas, right? Now it becomes lock man on that perimeter on that side. And so I do think that, like, again, that's one of the reasons you bring Marshawn in here is for those types of moments, right? Is those big moments against big time receivers. But I also think that that George Pickens, is one of the better deep 50-50 contested catch guys down the field. And so, like, this is kind of what I was referring to. Like, I'm not sure. And you'd have to have his coach, and I'm not a DB. So I'd probably defer to like Fred Smoot or Sean Springs on something like this. But I think he's in pretty good phase. I think he's being physical. I'm not sure there's a lot he could do other than like look up and try to play the football at some point. But again, George Pickens does a good job with late hands there. Doesn't really give him an indicator to look up. Again, somebody brought this up to me, like in terms of, why is he so close to the line of scrimmage? Like one of the number one plays they call there versus four receivers away is a slant. And if you're giving him too much cushion with, again, that quarter safety to your side, eyes to the four receiver side, that slant could be an explosive play too. So I do think that because
you don't want to take your chances there though, and they gotta, it's less than a minute left in the half to rally and tackle a slant than a 50-50 ball with Pickens down the field.
So I think even the way you just described that with 50-50, right, is something that I would point to, because there was a period of time where, like with the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, where anytime you showed press coverage, they would automatically default to a 50-50 contested catch down the field. And you could basically get them on 3rd and 1 instead of running the football, throw a 50-50 ball, and it was a low percentage completion, right? And you could get them off the field. And so I do think the nature of a 50-50 ball is that it's a 50-50. Now, I think you could argue that because of the person throwing the football and because of the person catching the football, it's no longer a 50-50. But if we're trying to defend, and I think it's important to remind the audience that in this situation, the field goal kicker is absolutely playing out of his mind at the moment. So you're also kind of defending a very almost an unrealistic standard in terms of how far these guys are kicking field goals now. So the slant would have got you into field goal range, I would argue, as well. Because, again, everyone's pushing to the four receiver side. He's totally playing isolation basketball there. And so, again, that's something I would just say, if you're taking a 50-50 shot down the field in a 2-minute situation with Marshawn Lattimore and that tight of coverage, I don't know if he could have been tighter.
No, I thought he covered it great. I tend to be on Jay's side where I'm wondering how do we get to a point where it's an island with Lattimore on the sideline against Pickens?
So again, I just explained that.
You answered the question.
You formation it, and I will say, earlier in that half, they had some excellent success with quarters coverage. It kind of totally flummoxed Dak, and it ended up leading to 2 sacks because, again, it just kind of killed all of his answers versus all of the route combinations that he wanted to work, and so he had to hold the football. Ended up leading to 2 sacks. And I think even the first play of that drive that got them to 2nd and 17 was a sack versus quarters coverage. So to me, it's maybe you just feel like that's the move because Dak seems unsettled with it. You have 2 sacks on 2 calls. You call it again. They kind of formation you up. You get this explosive play down the field. And so, to me, that's ball sometimes. Sometimes you get got. And again, I don't really have a problem with the call. I think Dallas did a good job with their call, obviously, as I just alluded to. But, obviously going back, I'm sure Joe Witt would have been we should have been in Tampa too. But if they go Tampa 2, they obviously had a breakdown earlier in the game. And does that lead to an explosive play? Who knows?
It makes sense. And the Cowboys did a good job with the motion and what they did. Sounds like to get that look. What someone listening might say would be there's end of half situations in every game, every single week with bad and good defenses. And it's never that easy. It's 40 seconds to go 80 yards. It's actually about longer than that because of the sack to start the drive. But and 44 there, followed by the 33, which we can get into on the run. But the 44-yard pass, okay, so they did a couple things and they got the right look, and now it's one-on-one against quarters. I watch games every single week, 10 times a day, a Sunday, and at the end of the half, the quarterback is forced to throw the ball 5 to 7 yards on checkdowns, and you get down the field that way, or you don't get down the field. You never see anybody behind the deepest guy getting a deep ball in that situation. And the default for me is to say, if that's the case, something went very wrong.
So I understand that, and I understand that completely in terms of people listening, and it's a great question. But again, given the situation, given the field goal kicker, what is the actual line you're defending?
Well, I'm okay giving up a 65-yard field goal.
I know you are, Grant. I know you are. So, but they're in quarters coverage, Grant. It's supposed to take away vertical routes. That's what it's supposed to do, right? And obviously they formationed it up. Again, the coverage is good. Sometimes you just get got. And I know that's really hard for people to understand in a game.
They get got too much.
Okay, Grant, I'm not that's not the point of this conversation right now, is to say that they're not getting, like, we can talk about that more specifically. There's other plays. The Tampa 2 one, I think, is a great example of what you're talking about. It's a breakdown. To me, in this situation, right, if I called quarters versus this look and Marshawn Lattimore's in that coverage, in that relationship to the receiver, they just got us. And again, like, there's a run later on that drive where it ends up being a 33-yard gain. That's a misfit in terms of run fits. We can talk about that because that's a frustrating call, because I think you're in the right look and you get gashed for 33 yards. That's a tough look, right? But on that play versus that call, like, I feel like we're playing Monday morning quarterback here a little bit in terms of saying, well, they shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like, in the moment he made a decision. It was a call. It was relatively well executed, and they got us. Like, and that's football. And now, again, there's the Tampa 2 one. There's some explosive runs. Like, we can talk about the run fits all day defensively in terms of guys getting out of gaps.
Yeah, so let's do that. I mean, you had both your tackles. Payne, I thought, played his butt off. He had 3 batted balls, had a safety, had a TFL, had quarterback hits. Kinlaw was the least noticeable he's been at any point this season. I think he's been an incredible player for them. But they're $15 million man. I know he drew a hold at one point. Even going back and watching the tape, you didn't notice him very much. So you could tell me, were they taking him out of the game? Were they doing something different? We didn't have what Joe Witt calls those, like, turnaround plays at the line of scrimmage, or the big TFLs from Kinlaw. They just didn't happen. But you had both your tackles. You had your 2 second-team All-Pro linebackers who you paid $21 million to. This is not an injury thing, and you gave up 145 on 26 carries. It's 2 straight weeks they've been gashed on the ground. So what went wrong there?
I mean, I think this is a tough conversation because it's a couple of things. One, it's guys not being as physical as they could be, and that's always hard. I'm sure as a player, it's hard to hear someone say, sitting in a chair in a nice air-conditioned room, that they weren't being physical enough. But that shows up to me in run fits, And I also think there's just some assignment stuff. It's like 2 guys in a gap, like, and again, I don't know what the rules are for the run fits, right? But I know enough to know that there should never be 2 guys in the same gap. When there are 2 guys in the same gap, that means we're short in terms of fits, right? So, going back to that explosive run that Javonte Williams has, like, right before the half, like, they come down, they run a little line stunt. Kinlaw plays across the guard's face to the center. He kind of gets in the backside A gap a little bit more than I think he probably should. He probably should be in that front side A a little bit more. The safety's fitting from depth. Revo does a good job playing over the top, forcing it back. So you get Revo outside, you get the quarter safety fitting from outside. Kinlaw seems to be 1 gap removed, and they gash us in the A gap, the play side A gap, for a 33-yard gain because there's nobody in the middle of the field anymore, right? So that's a small example of saying, well, I don't know who was wrong, but obviously someone was wrong in that scenario, right? And I think when you're looking at run fits specifically in this game, like, it came up, it showed up way more than I would like it to, right? Because we talk about the coverage thing. This is a passing league. You're going to get PIs. Like, some of that stuff is outside of your control. The run fits to me are just, and I'm talking with Fletch about this as well, are just, are we all on the same page, and do we know what we're supposed to do? And so there are times in this game where that's a question that I'm asking and I don't have a good answer for it, right? And it's the same thing with some of the coverage stuff. It's like, why are we not carrying this vertically? And again, Dallas did some good stuff with regards to formations and motions that create challenges and challenge rules and kind of say, with this motion, do I need to be in the box? Probably, because this guy's going to carry, whatever that is. But I think, to me, that kind of stuff is maybe more indicative of the question you're asking, right? Where it's like, what is the solution? And to me, it's getting guys on the same page. Assignment, alignment, execution isn't exactly where it needs to be. And I don't have a good reason as to why that is. But in this game, on those plays specifically that we just talked about, the Tampa 2 with nobody carrying the vertical, and a lot of these run plays, it was difficult to know what the actual execution should look like.
And they were playing an elite offense. I mean, this Cowboys offense, like, the way Dak is playing right now, he's playing like an MVP. Right. Pickens, who I'm not a fan of, I just think he's a volatile goofball a little bit. Like, he's playing out of his mind. He's been amazing for them all season. CeeDee Lamb comes back, makes his presence felt. So right now, this moment, this is as difficult as an offense as there is to defend. I kind of grade on that curve. I go into the game understanding that. And then there was a little more pressure. We'll get to the offense, but they weren't able to keep up and kind of score the points they normally do to keep you in the game as well. I guess the last thing would be, and this is more for later in the week when we look ahead to the gauntlet here coming, starting with the Chiefs. But Dorrance Armstrong's been lost for the season. And he's their best pass rusher. He is leading them in sacks and pressures and quarterback hits and every other category. And he helps against the run. They've now lost Wise on one side, who is one of their really good run stuffers. Now you've lost Armstrong, so you're down both your top defensive ends. You got a third defensive end in Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who's out as well. So that's a cluster injury at a position that, this next man up thing is all fun and games until it's next man up at defensive end. Obviously, at D tackle, they're very healthy. I have questions about, Johnny Newton's getting out-snapped by Sheldon Day. Johnny Newton was the 36th pick in the draft last year. Sheldon Day was on the practice squad a few minutes ago. Got out-snapped by Eddie Goldman, who's retired a couple of times. Some of that's usage, obviously, because he's a big body against the run. But, they're super healthy at D tackle. They're not healthy at all at defensive end. So this is not going to get easier here, Logan, either. I mean, you're about to play a Chiefs team that scored 61 points in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's not going to get easier. And I do think, I think we've made a lot of the injuries on the offensive side of the football with regards to the receivers specifically. But I do think you feel like I think they miss Will Harris a lot, in terms of his communication and his leadership in the back end. I think you miss Dietrich Wise after going back and watching some of the Giants stuff and some of that Green Bay stuff. Like, he was exactly what they needed at the position. Just a physical guy who understood run fits. He was going to be where he's supposed to be. He was going to make life hell for the tight end. Dorrance the same way. And Jean-Baptiste, even though he didn't play a ton in the preseason because of the injury, was doing a really good job of that also. He's a big, long guy that is physical in terms of how he takes on blocks. And you've lost that. And so now you've kind of entered a land of, a lot of kind of pass rushing type guys, you know what I mean? And guys that don't necessarily major in run stopping on first and second down. And there's a mentality to that, but there's also an assignment element to that. So how many reps did Von Miller get on with first and second down run fits? I don't know. You know what I mean? Preston Smith was, on the street a couple weeks ago. Like, he's in.
Well, remember
now,
this too. Sorry to cut you off, but
yeah, go ahead.
I remember doing a pod with you, and something I've talked about on my show a lot, but right before the season, where I actually kind of really liked their defensive line plan.
Yeah.
I obviously would have, like everyone else, of course you want TJ Watt at edge. Yeah, me too. But
that's good analysis. Yeah.
Yeah,
good
exactly.
Football players. Yeah.
Give me TJ Watt and give me Aaron Donald. But their plan I loved because I comped it to you like a bullpen, where they're going to use guys in situations where they can thrive. So like with Von Miller, he's going to be a third down guy and a fourth quarter closer, right? Like with Wise, it's going to be rundowns where he can be heavy. And like each guy, Jacob Martin, who by the way, I thought played his butt off in Dallas. He had 7 pressures.
Played out of his mind.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that guy. And maybe he's the guy that steps up with Dorrance Armstrong out, right? But regardless, I guess my point is all of these guys offer something. If any of them were at this point like super complete, they'd be all down, highly paid players, but they all give you a skill. And I thought they were going to be like, okay, it's the 7th inning. We're going to our lefty against these lefties. Okay, it's the 8th inning. This guy can't hit off speed, so we're going to our, whatever. They can't really do that now because of all the injuries. And so Von Miller's playing on first and second down, and Jacob Martin's an all-down defensive end. And so my point is like, yeah, obviously it's not going to work as well. Like, this is no longer the plan. The plan was this thing where we got these 8 guys we like. And I know that's not expected that they would all stay healthy, but there's probably a middle ground between that unrealistic expectation, especially after last year when everybody was healthy other than John Allen, basically, and the regression this year where nobody's healthy. And so now it's like, it's just not what they set up the plan to be that we all liked so much going into the year on the D-line.
Yeah, I think you feel that. I think you feel it there. It's just tough. And this is a tough sport. And this is some part of the deal with the NFL is guys get hurt. And so now it's like, how do you handle this? Now Adam Peters has got to go kind of scour practice squads, figure out if there's anybody available to bring in here to kind of help them with this vision. But yeah, you do feel that lack of depth, specifically with guys like Jean-Baptiste and Dietrich Wise. Like what they were doing was really, really valuable for this team. And so you lost both those guys, and you lost Dorrance, and it's hard to stay effective when people are banged up this way.
Totally is. And yet this is the gig, right? They got to find a way. I just watched the Lions last night without any of their DBs shove it on the Atlanta Falcons, right? Kyle Shanahan has the 49ers picking random dudes out of the crowd to play, and they're 5-2. I'm not saying that should be the expectation. Like, I'm not some tough guy. Injuries don't matter. But it also can't be that you just kind of fold up shop and now, you're giving up 40 a week. So they got to figure something out, and they'll go back to the drawing board and try to do that. Where you have empathy is now you got to go to Arrowhead. Then you get the Seahawks off a bye. Like that's not fun. Then the Lions came to town. This is going to be a gauntlet of a stretch. We're about to find out a lot about this group. All right, let's get to the offense next. It's Take Command. He's Logan. I'm Grant, making sense of a 22-point divisional loss to the Dallas Cowboys. Take Command, Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen with you. Commanders drop a game 44-22 to the Dallas Cowboys. We're doing Logan's film review, going back through some of the specifics on how we got here this week as Washington is now 3-4. All right, let's look at the offensive side of the ball. I want to start with the run game. This is the biggest surprise to me of the day, is that against the number 26 run defense in the league in EPA per play, they couldn't really run the ball. They came out running it well. They had stacked boxes and 8 and 7 yard carries on the first two runs against 7 or more in the box. And as the day went on, even against 4, I saw a number where they rushed against 4 in the box 4 times and averaged 1 yard per carry in this game.
4? So, what do you mean 4? Like a 4-man front?
Yeah, 4-man front where it was a super light box where like linebackers are, off the ball by X amount of yards and basically not a heavy box. And still against a 4-man front, they averaged 1 yard per carry on those runs. So that's not like they loaded the box because they didn't respect the receivers, which happened some in this game too. But where do we go here?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see which plays they designated that way and why they designated that way. Because I actually felt that when they were in 12, 13 personnel, even some 11 with Luke at the F, that they were in heavy boxes and they brought a ton of pressure on first down. And they brought a lot of like nickel or strong safety, depends how you characterize the player, kind of stunts to the open side of the run. And so what they're doing there with some of that stuff is they're basically saying, like, you now have to target this player who's on the perimeter here, and it just peels all the double teams. So, like, they had a little bit of success early with, like, a duo kick with Bates kicking out the defensive end, and they brought a strong safety pressure that I'm describing, where they kind of bring the pressure, then they stunt basically towards the run. And they kind of got lucky because somebody got caught in the wash. The combination was able to get off and ended up being a little bit of a gash. They ran a duo out of 13, same type of thing. But after that, the pattern that they were bringing got a little bit more efficient. I'm talking about Dallas. And again, like, you just got the targets got kind of jacked up. And again, out of 12 and 13 personnel, like, there was a ton of this, like, we're bringing the nickel or strong safety, whatever that is. We're stunting the front. And because that guy – a general rule for offenses is you don't block safeties. Like, the receivers would block the safety as an example. But when you're pressuring that guy to get the run started, you have to target him, right? So then all of a sudden, because you're targeting a safety, you're now short in terms of what combination is going to get to a linebacker. And so I felt like there was some of that going on. And people say, well, that happens all the time. Like, how do you insulate yourself? One is you get more reps versus that look. One thing that stuck out to me is prior to this, obviously Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury, they do a great job kind of reading the nickel pressure and then throwing the bubble. And they did not do that at all in this game. And I don't know if it's because they were getting man coverage on the perimeter, but there was a couple times where they're bringing the nickel pressure, they're showing it ahead of time, and you could throw a bubble. And again, it is man coverage, but the guy's an off man or they're an off shell. And so that was a wrinkle that I was surprised that we didn't see more of in this game. If they're going to bring this pressure on first and second down versus this group of personnel, like we should probably be dishing that ball out a little bit more. And I felt like maybe not having Deebo Samuel, like that's where you feel his effect a little bit. You just feel less confident in the production of those little kind of, they're not RPO, but like run alerts. Like if you get certain pressures, you're going to alert the screen here. I felt like you could feel his impact maybe in terms of the willingness to get the ball out to that player on some of these first and second down run pressures from Dallas.
Take command with Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. Yeah, it didn't seem like as the game went on there was any running room at all for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Like, to me, this wasn't what's he doing here? You watch it, and he's getting swallowed up at the line, or he's getting hit twice in the backfield, redirected. So it did feel, some of what you just said, you could kind of see that watching it back. Sam Cosmi played for the first time since the playoffs. You expect a little bit of rust probably. What'd you see from him? I mean, it's been a long time since he played football, and kudos to him for working hard to get back. But he replaces Andrew Wiley at right guard. First time we've seen this alignment.
Yeah, I think like you said, like first time coming back, there's probably a little bit of rust. I don't think he played poorly, but I don't think it's the Sam Cosmi that we saw who's a borderline Pro Bowl player either. Like he's still kind of getting back in football shape, getting used to moving, getting used to leaning on people. And again, he did some really good things, but also there were some things where you're like, like that's him kind of getting back in the swing of things a little bit. So, and again, like this is a tough game to come back. If teams are going to play us like this in terms of the stunts and the pressures, like we got to get more efficient at targeting them, and we got to get more efficient at having solutions that put the offense in a better situation. Because it's just having been a guy in the blocking surface a ton, like when you get this kind of movement on first down and second down versus some of the runs that they're calling, it's really, really, really challenging to be effective in combinations. Because one of the things about duo, as an example, is you want to make sure you get on the double team, you sit on the double team, you create horizontal movement, horizontal and vertical movement. But all of a sudden we get these line movements, you're peeling double teams right now. Because the rule on duo is I got to protect my inside gap. So I would say Cosmi looks good coming back. I think it's a general kind of philosophy and approach that needs to be modified to account for this, because I do think this is what teams are going to be doing more and more as the season progresses, because obviously it's something that is a little bit of a bugaboo for our run game stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. By the way, his PFF pass blocking grade, and I know that's not gospel, but I think, they watch every play and grade it as best they can, was elite. I mean, they had him in like upper 80s in terms of pass blocking in his first game back. Run score was not nearly as good, but it's more complicated, as you said. Like there's timing to that, and that's where the rust could show up. You said something, I don't remember the exact quote, but something like, if it's going to be like this with how defenses combat them, then they need to, they're basically finding solutions becomes the challenge. What does that mean? Is that a coaching thing, a scheme thing, or like in real time? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like probably prior to this, you weren't expecting to see a ton of this. Like I went back and watched the Giants game, and I watched the Las Vegas game, and those teams didn't do this. They just kind of played their normal defensive coverage. And again, Schottenheimer came out in a press conference after the game, was basically like, why did you bring so much pressure? Why were you so aggressive? And it's like the analytics or the statistics show that we should play the team this way. And so I do think that more teams are going to do this. More teams are going to be bringing these line stunts, first and second down pressures, 5-man rushes, 6-man rushes on first down. And again, like that's hard sledding. So either we got to rep that more and just kind of be prepared for that, kind of no matter who we're playing, or we have to develop solutions to augment and make the runs more effective versus those looks, or call runs that account for that movement. And again, that is, kind of a game plan preparatory thing. And, for example, like I would have gotten got by Eberflus this week because I was not expecting him to be that aggressive, because historically he has not been that aggressive. So I do think that, we talked in the preview pod about how he's going to do his thing. You could play. He did not do his thing.
And he did not do his thing. They went man 48% of the time. They don't really do that. I think that was probably indicative. You could agree or disagree with me on this. They didn't fear the receivers probably, so they just said, okay, we're going to play man on the outside against Robbie Anderson and Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane, and they can beat us or not, but we're going to, as you said, do some more aggressive things coming downhill in the run game especially. But they played almost half man. They were one of the lowest man teams in the league coming in.
I think they had the highest zone percentage of any team in the NFL prior to this week. So obviously, talk about a complete departure. They had, a really low percentage of 8-man boxes as well. Like this is a complete departure of who they were from who they were prior. So I do expect if they're willing to do it, and again, like we're going up against Kansas City here in a couple of days, that this is who they are. Like they want to be aggressive. They want to be man coverage. They want to play, kind of 8-man boxes and get after your butt a little bit on first and second down. I think that's who they're going to be. And so like it's not going to be alleviated. Like we just need to think about ways to put the offensive line in better positions with some of these targets and find ways to, again, like just make it easier. And I think about the little bubble screens and stuff. When you're bringing nickel pressure, if you're disguising it, that guy's off at 12 yards. We can hit that little bubble. And again, that's not going to be a touchdown necessarily, but it can be a 10, 12, 8-yard gain, and it can discourage them from continuing to run the pressure. So I was a little surprised, and they did a lot of stuff where the back is offset away from the two receiver side, which makes it hard for the quarterback to read that you can do it, but it is challenging. So I just wonder, what was the emphasis of that in the game plan? Why? Because again, that was such a big part of this offense earlier in the year. Why did they get away from it? Again, was it because Debo's out? There could be a myriad of reasons, but those were some thoughts I had about the run game specifically in terms of insulating it and just making it easier for that group moving forward.
So looking to see what you saw then, Logan, on Josh Connerly. A lot of people have talked about 3 penalties were called against him, and he was assigned 4 pressures by PFF in this game. He'd been playing at a high level since the first couple of weeks. What did you see on the tape?
Yeah, I think you saw a guy that's getting used to playing in a road environment that gets pretty boisterous in there. You've been to Dallas before, and it's a tough place to play from a sound noise level. And I do think you felt that a little bit in terms of some of his sets, he kind of reverted to some old habits that he had earlier in the year where he's kind of given this soft outside shoulder. And again, that's one of the deals of having a young player in the lineup is you got to deal with some growing pains. And I think, at least me, I can't speak for everybody, but I've been very pleased with his progression. This feels like a slight step back in terms of what he's been doing, but I think there are reasons and explanations as to why that would be versus this team. Again, you're seeing a lot of different looks, a lot of movement in the front, a lot of different pressures. And when you're stressing a player mentally, you're stressing them from a snap count standpoint. I think you're going to find that pressure burst pipes. And I felt like that was a little bit, Josh Connerly in this game.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. All right, then let's go skills-wise. We talked Jaden Daniels here. First off, he's injured, which is ominous, but hopefully he's okay. They said it's not serious or long-term, but it's a hamstring. We're recording this pod. We don't know anything about his status for this coming week. I don't know. I mean, with hamstrings in a running quarterback, I worry, just like I would a receiver or running back. Like,
right.
If he were to play Sunday, you would know this better than I would. I would think you're more at risk of doing something worse to your hamstring, but I'm not a doctor, so I guess I shouldn't speculate. But this is now multiple injuries this season. It's 3 if you go back to last year. To me, the whole story is they got to keep him healthy. He's got to stay on the field because he gives them a chance to win every football game if he's out there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I think he's a good football player. He's probably the best football player, most impactful football player on the team for sure. And so, yeah, with the hamstring, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this progresses. Like I went back and watched the clip and kind of saw the mechanism of injury, and it's not.
It was the play before, right, where he ran out of bounds and grabbed the hammy, where he got hurt.
I think the way I saw it was like he kind of like stomped his foot down on the sack, and like when you're catching yourself, like that eccentric load sometimes can give you a little bit of juice in the hamstring. So I might have missed it on the play before, but so
Quinn said he got hurt the play before, and when I went back and watched it, you could I think it was like he ran out of bounds, if memory serves. Okay. But he kind of just grabs at the back of his leg briefly, and you're like, I wonder if he just felt something. And then the next play is where it went on him or whatever happened. Happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So again, I don't know. Hamstrings are funny, right? Like I remember, I had a chronic hamstring injury in 2011, and I was able to practice on it and play on it and run, but it always kind of felt like it was going to go. You know what I mean? I get bruising every day, and it was really tough. But again, then I had another one.
Did you run full speed?
No, I wouldn't run full speed, but it was like, I could run like, I remember the route tree was like, if it was inside of 10 yards, I felt like, okay, you know what I mean? Like I felt like I could handle it. But if I really had to open up and dig, it was like, I don't know what's going to happen. But then then I had an injury in an off season where I like pulled my hamstring and I couldn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what the injury is. We don't know what the injury is. So, I would be skeptical that he does play this week if it is like a full pull. But also, I think the other thing to just point out is he might have come back in the game, but the game was so out of hand at that point that there's no reason for him to come back.
True.
So I just,
in fairness, he
played
through or finished the Packers game too.
Yeah,
and then he was basically out for 3 weeks after that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
No,
he's tough as hell. He played through a broken rib. He probably should have been out for a month last year.
Yeah. So again, like hamstrings are funny. Like some guys handle them really, really well. Some guys don't. Like it just, we'll see. I would be, although I would be, again, just given my history with hamstrings, I'd be a little bit skeptical that he plays this week.
So then on Jaden, so I am willing to, like, on that play where he fumbled, assume that that like the injury is why he fumbled. You know what I mean? Where like Mike Evans last night. I don't know if you saw, he like broke his clavicle in like a really scary looking diving play, and he had a catch. And as he's like rolling over, the ball lets go of the ball, because in that moment, screw this football. I'm not that concerned about it. It's no longer life. My clavicle is broken. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't know if that's why Jaden fumbled on that play. It's like, oh, that pain is excruciating, and I'm going to worry about my hamstring. And I don't mean you make a conscious decision as much as it's just what happens in the play. But it's 2 times in 2 games where pretty carelessly he's lost a fumble in the backfield, which was not a thing necessarily at any point last year. I don't think it's something to worry about moving forward as much as it is an observation. -5 now for them in turnover margin this year. Only a couple teams came into week 7 worse than that. The Ravens, who are having a terrible year, and the Jets, who haven't won yet. Last year at this time, they turned the ball over 3 times. This year, I think it's 8 times. And when you're not generating takeaways, obviously it compounds it and becomes a bigger deal. But your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not that worried about this turnover specifically. Like, you get quick pressure, you're trying to make a quick move. Could he be more protective of the football? Sure. I don't think it's going to be like a long-term thing necessarily, like where he's fumbling all the time. With regards to the turnovers in general, I think that's something that they got to be more aware of, just protecting the football, especially with the defense not creating turnovers, right? So, like, it's just simple math. Like, the more turnovers you get, the more opportunities you get to possess the football and be on the field. And they just haven't done that at a high level this year. So I think, if you're a fan, you're looking for some semblance of optimism. Like, maybe it's the fact that turnover luck or turnover variance kind of goes in waves, and so maybe they're about to enter a wave where they have a bunch of turnovers and they end up kind of middle of the pack on the year. So I don't know, it is something that you need to be aware of. I've nenever been a guy that has understood how you coach it. Obviously Dan Quinn has been able to bring that with him in multiple places, but like, to me, it's like every place I've been at, they say, oh, we're going to win the football, oh, we're going to take care of the football. It just is a little bit of serendipity about whether or not those things get actualized.
And same with defense. Maybe you could scheme some stuff up, I guess, but for the most part, it's like football players making plays. It's the punch fumble. It's someone, last night saw a guy kind of, we were talking earlier about Lattimore and kind of being a football player or what, like he just foregoes his responsibility and goes and picks off a pass last night. You see some of that occasionally, right? And all of a sudden the coach isn't that mad about it because you're handing him the football on the sideline. But 3 takeaways through 7 games, and they've turned it over, I think, 8 times.
That's definitely something they got to get better at, for sure.
What did you think of the receivers? They were down their big 3. You take the top 3 receivers off just about any team other than maybe the Niners. It's not going to be that fun. But what did you – I mean, Lane had the 1 drop. I love Jalen Lane's game. He had the big 35-yard catch on that plaster play where Jaden did a nice job. Kind of buying time, and the protection on that play was great. Luke, 2 targets, no catches, and an opportunity without the big 3. Robbie Anderson off the practice squad was their leader with 4 grabs. Moore had the big 44-yard catch and run on a beautiful ball on the move from Daniels. What did you think overall?
Yeah, I just think there's the consistency of the offense without those main guys in there is starting to show up. And what I mean by that, there's a play in the red zone. I think it's the Zach Ertz touchdown where you get two guys in the same area of the field. So like obviously someone didn't get the right call, someone didn't run the right depth. There's a play where, he throws a kind of a hitch to Moore and it's incomplete. I went back and watched all of their pass cut-ups from this year and found the concept when Terry and Noah were in there. And it's supposed to be a 5-yard route. He's pushing that almost to 10. So you're not on the same page with the quarterback there. It's just that stuff is going to come up, right? There's the ball to Luke where Luke gets tugged coming out of the top of his break and the ball's a little bit off. He's kind of like anticipating, accelerating into the football.
Is that the first throw of the game on the third down?
Yes. There's a little tug at the top there. And I think he could be a little bit more accurate. I'm sure Jaden would say the same thing, a little bit more accurate, but like there does seem to be just a lack of ideal chemistry on some of these routes. And if you think back to training camp, you were out there, like the guy running those routes was like Debo and Zach Ertz. So now all of a sudden you're kind of building that rep bank, if you will, or that rep reserve with a new guy kind of in the season on the fly. And I do think like it's really hard to articulate how challenging that is. It's just really, really hard to say, like, this is the angle he's coming out. This is what he's going to do. And then to get, honestly, like 3 bad drops in this game, I thought was also a little bit surprising. Like, I go back and I look at the PFF stuff with adjusted completion percentage, and his completion percentage was 51%. And then if you adjust it with the drops in there, it's 71 or whatever it is. So, like, obviously these are significant plays in this ball game. And that's not to say he was perfect, but I do think, like, it's just the lack of chemistry, the lack of timing just kind of pops up in these weird moments and really makes it hard to run an effective offense. And again, like Jane Daniels misses that completion to Zach Ertz where they're not quite on the same page. There's like a hook player right underneath it. He puts a little bit more air on it than he needs to. So I do think there's a lot of that just miscommunication. And I think another thing is just lack of offensive rhythm. I've felt this as a player sometimes when you'd go 3 and out a couple times and you just were kind of pressing a little bit more than you should, trying to do more than you needed to. And again, like all of that stuff seems to be showing up here. And, I look at the games they've been successful and they've had kind of easy button moments where they've been able to find an explosive chunk play or they've been able to run the football efficiently. And right now, at least standing on the sideline, everything feels hard. And we talked about why that is in the run game. In the pass game, I just think we just got to find ways to get guys more on the same page. And I think also when you look earlier in the year, I went back and watched the Giants game and the Las Vegas game. Like Jane Daniels did a great job versus zone coverage. And now in man coverage, like there's just not enough space. You're not getting guys who can create kind of top shelf separation all the time. And I do think it's negatively affecting Jaden in terms of his ability to execute at a high level.
They got some things to figure out. An extra day to do it. Monday Night Football against the Chiefs, but you're playing against now the MVP favorite and Patrick Mahomes, an offense that's cooking. Rashee Rice is back, so it's going to be a very, very tall order. But I always feel like, the NFL is an amazing sport because you get the game and then you get the week for us all to opine and yell and talk about it all. But it's never really as good as it feels when, like, everything's going great. You think about, like, New England or Chicago right now where they haven't lost in a few weeks. And it's also never as bad as it feels either. And I kind of feel like this is one of those weeks. It certainly sounds like you feel that way about the operation largely that, this is how the game played out. But if you restarted it right now, you probably don't lose by 22 and it could have gone very differently. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a tough game. It was a tough game in terms of execution on multiple levels. And like as people get hurt, the margin for error gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So, if the team was at its best, like they probably have the ability to overcome some of these miscues. But, we just talked about the injuries on the defensive line, the injury at safety with Harris. And obviously the injuries at receiver, just you got to be.
If Josh Harris was playing safety, they'd be in big trouble.
Tough deal.
I mean, can you imagine how many big plays? You think 74 was bad? I mean, that would be a weekly. No offense, Josh Harris. I think you're an amazing owner, and you're my hero, and you got the team away from Dan. But I just don't know if that's the best use of your resources.
That's not the best move, right? But again, like I think like that's something that I'm sure. When Dan talks about being accountable, like it just the target is very small right now, and we got to play really good football, penalty free, high execution, well schemed up, well played football. And this last week wasn't it. And so I think moving into this Kansas City week with the extra day, hopefully they can get some of that stuff figured out.
All right, we're gonna have Logan take a good look at the Chiefs, who have been putting on a clinic here the last couple of weeks, and we will have a preview pod for you in just a couple of days looking ahead to the Kansas City matchup. How does Washington pull off a shocker? I think they were installed as 9.5-point underdogs on the road to open the week. We still don't know about the status of Jaden Daniels. Hopefully we'll get some clarity before you and I talk again. Thanks for checking us out on Take Command. You can watch all of Logan's broadcasts and content on the Commanders' socials. You can listen to me, 106.7 The Fan, 2 to 6:30, each and every day with Danny Rouillet. Also, watch us, 106.7, Team 980 YouTube channels, and download the pod. Wherever you get your audio, it's available. Spread the word. Send it to buddies. We want to keep growing it. Thanks for checking out Take Command.